What's up, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer from blueandgold.com with On3's Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power. If you missed video one that we posted on Tuesday, just go ahead and pause this, go watch that. We'll leave a description. We'll leave a link to that video in the description of this video, so make sure you go watch that. We did a deep dive into Dante Moore and Keon Keeley and the impact that they can have at Notre Dame. Before we dive into this video, make sure you guys hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our channel if you have not yet. So we're going to focus a little bit more into specific like Notre Dame commits in this 2023 class, the impact that this class can have on the future of Fighting Irish football. First, Charles, Notre Dame commit or commits plural that you're very intrigued with going into their senior season. Guys that can, make a big jump in the rankings or maybe take a tumble if they don't look as good.
Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of just starting at the top of the list, Keon Keeley is one we're going to have under the microscope, as our number 3 prospect. So he kind of goes without mentioning. Peyton Bowen, I'm probably maybe the most familiar with Peyton Bowen just in terms of my exposure to him of all of the Notre Dame commits. So I'll kind of exclude him as well. I mean, just because he was on a powerhouse, he's on a powerhouse, high school team in Texas, and they play so many big games. I think I probably watched like 6 of their games last year, maybe more. So kind of after those guys, ones I'm looking forward to just seeing as seniors, Drake Bowen, like we haven't had, the last measurables we have on him are from a camp like a year or two ago, just kind of seeing how he's continued to fill out and progress. Brennan Vernon, speaking of just kind of, size change, Mike, I know you've talked about this, like he's put on a bunch of weight. He's maybe projects inside now at like 6'5", 280 plus pounds. So kind of seeing where he's kind of landed on physically and just kind of maybe like assessing him as a potential, defensive tackle, nose tackle type, and just kind of seeing where he's at body wise. Braylon James is an interesting one. Braylon James is in the combine setting one of the more athletic receivers in the country. He's a guy who his athleticism and just his testing numbers are probably a little ahead of him from like the rest of his game from like a skill perspective and production and kind of what he can do like as an actual receiver. So just kind of seeing how he's kind of continued to develop or just kind of looking at his progress as a senior is going to be, I think, big for him because receiver, in addition to quarterback, receiver is a position where if you go through all these, top college football players at the position and draft picks, ultimately, they're almost all extremely productive. Like I think most of the receivers that are first rounders, they're all like 1,000 plus yards, 10 plus touchdowns. Almost all of them are over 15 yards a catch. So just kind of seeing how Braylon James, just getting a better feel for where his skill level at the position.
And Charles, he transferred, so he was at Del Valley, and he transferred,
right.
And it was a 2-win team last year. So yeah, that's one thing. When he committed, I was like, he's at Stony Point now. Hopefully, get a little bit better quarterback play to, show him off a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's always kind of difficult with receivers, right? Is just kind of assessing the situation and, I think he probably didn't have like a ton of crazy targets. Like a lot of his best plays were as a kick returner last year. So, getting him some more opportunities to kind of see what he can do. Just with a more expanded route tree. A lot of stuff he was kind of doing as a junior was just vertical routes out of the slot, kick returner. So we can get a better feel for kind of what he can do as a complete receiver with a transfer. So that's sometimes these transfers, help us out with just getting a better look at a prospect's full game. So those guys are all interesting. I mean, Cooper Flanagan is one. He plays high profile football out there in Northern California for De La Salle, kind of like a two-way guy, I believe. So kind of maybe getting more looks at him as an actual like pass catcher, tight end. They've run the same like veer offense for like 30 years there. So it's just it can be a little difficult, kind of assessing like actual tight end in that offense. So if we don't see him at a camp or anything, just more opportunity to maybe take a look at him as a pass catcher. Because I remember, Mike, Notre Dame was heavily involved with Austin Hooper back in the day, and he was at that same high school. And I think a lot of people were looking at him as a defensive end back then, or an edge. And he obviously went on to have a really good career at Stanford and got drafted high and has made a bunch of money in the NFL. And they had another defensive end tight end, Devin Asiata, who went to Michigan and was, I think, a third round pick with the Patriots. So De La Salle has kind of had a pretty good track record of, defensive end, tight end, hybrid type guys or two-way players.
Isaiah Foskey, he's not a bad
Yeah,
edge.
yeah, that have transitioned well in the last, I don't know, when was Hooper, 5-10 years ago? So 10 years ago probably. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of Flanagan for sure. But yeah, I mean, those were probably the guys that I'm probably most interested in looking at. I would say Devin Houston as well. Devin Houston, um, first year playing American football last year, and really, I think a lot of times we see kind of with these international prospects, maybe less so with guys from Canada, but it can be a transition coming into the United States and playing, U.S. high school football, and he really had no issues with that transition at all. And I think he's a guy who, when you look at, his frame, his stature, his brother is like an NBA prospect, plays at Michigan. I think he might have the capacity to continue just kind of growing into his body. And so I'm really interested to see kind of, how he progresses. He of this group, just kind of looking at like, guys who, as things stand now, maybe have a capacity for just upside and continuing to rise, or just like as they develop physically, he would probably be the one that I would zone in on, as just kind of from doing this over the years. He has kind of the look of that type, but we'll have to obviously see how they all play. But he was more of a developmental type who turned out to be like a really good player. So yeah.
All right, good stuff. And then Houston, defensive lineman, definitely wanted to kind of focus in on that group specifically because, I mean, Texas A&M's defensive line class last year was kind of unprecedented, Charles. I mean, that was a ridiculous class. But Notre Dame is putting together, I mean, we're going to watch Boubacar Traore's tape. There's not a ton of them out there on film, but, On3's got him ranked, number 83 player nationally. I believe, number 10 defensive lineman or number 11 defensive lineman. You have Houston committed. You got Keeley committed, who we've talked a lot about. Brennan Vernon. I mean, it's a pretty good group. What do you see specifically with Boubacar Traore that makes you rank him so high?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, Mike, I mean, there's not a ton out there from his junior year. I think the things that we like the most about him is he has pass rush ability. As a guy who can play multiple spots within the defensive line. He's very long. I think he has, I don't know, close to like a 6'11" wingspan. Moves pretty well. He's got some functional athleticism, but he's one. I mean, like as I mentioned before, I mean, the senior year is going to be, telling on him. But you can kind of see right there how he kind of, runs the hoop, bends around the edge, and he kind of finishes as a pass rusher. So for a bigger prospect who we project, ultimately kind of being in that, like, I mean, what was he, like maybe 250 or something, like the last candidate too, which was a while back. For a bigger guy, he can rush the passer, and I think that there's a premium on that, especially as when you're considered a defensive lineman. So I mean, the flashes are certainly really intriguing with him. I think the biggest thing with him kind of continuing to stay that high is just, seeing how he plays as a senior. Like that kind of trumps everything. But I think his ranking currently is kind of just based off of the flashes of skill that he's shown, and kind of the versatility he could bring.
And then, Charles, just your thoughts about this defensive line class in general for Notre Dame. I mean, especially if they add Jason Moore from DeMatha Catholic, another guy who's versatile, can play some multiple spots. I mean, just how good could, that quintet be if they're able to sign those five?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really excited about that. I mean, if that's kind of how it shakes out for Notre Dame. Yeah, I think you have a bunch of big-bodied guys up there that you can move around. You can play multiple alignments with them. You can slide some of those guys inside and rush on obvious passing downs. But yeah, I think just from a size and pass rush perspective, I mean that would be up there among the best defensive line hauls in this class. And we don't really know how it's going to shake out with other teams. I mean, Notre Dame is probably pacing ahead
Right.
of other teams in terms of just filling out their class. But I would feel pretty good in saying that 5-man class would be one of the best hauls at the position. And like we see that every year. Like you have to stack talent at defensive line. Unlike other positions where you can have one quarterback, he's going to take all the snaps. Like these teams are rolling in defensive linemen throughout a game, so depth there is key, especially when you're playing offenses that are running tempo and tiring out your guys. I mean, we saw that with Georgia last year. I mean, Georgia, shoot, I mean they were 6-7 deep with like legit star defensive linemen, and they were able to keep those guys fresh. I think Jordan Davis played like 25 snaps a game last year, so having that ability, that depth, and stacking those guys within classes is, I mean, that's kind of what separates, these playoff teams from a lot of the others.
All right, that's been On Three Director of Scouting and Ranking Charles Power going through Notre Dame's 2023 class, specific eye there at the end of the video on the defensive line. Make sure you guys hit the thumbs up on this video. Go to blueandgold.com for all of your Fighting Irish coverage, $1 for 1 year premium access. Hit the thumbs up, and we will catch you guys next time.